It's time to chill out and get ready for a mediocre Q&A live stream. If you're old enough, grab yourself your favorite adult beverage, and if you're not, stick with apple juice. Put your feet up and relax. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. And now let's cue up the intro music. Yo. Hello, everybody. How you guys doing? Hopefully everybody's doing good. I am alive, so it is good. Life moves on. We get to live another day. Thankful for that. I talked about it a lot during all the craziness of last year and stuff, but, it's the simple things. We do have a lot to be thankful for. Our silly problems. That's one thing that I'm super grateful for. Is my silly problems, the petty stuff that there's so many other people that have, crazy problems and stuff. And I'm worried about being inconvenienced because of traffic or, something silly like that. So I am grateful for my silly problems. So just something to think about. But got a bunch of stuff I want to talk about as usual. And I want to get to your guys' questions. So let's get on with it, okay? So, remember, if you guys do have questions or things you want me to cover, please, you can put them in the chat, put them in caps lock. That helps myself and the moderators to kind of see them. Keep in mind, if I don't answer your question right away, just go ahead and post it again. But, guys, keep the questions, let's make them relevant questions, the truth, it is true that there's really no stupid questions, but there's also questions that distract the stream. So try to keep it down. All right. But keep them good stuff. So, yes, I do have hair. Most people don't know that I have hair. My hair has been growing out for a while now, so it's still a little unmanageable, but I'm not into the hat thing right now. It's kind of giving me a headache. So, let me see what we got going on in here. Okay. I have got one thing that I actually want to start off with talking about, okay? And I said this, I think, on the last stream, and I'll say it again, that oftentimes when I'm making a video, you have to understand something. I also am trying to better myself when it comes to the videos, okay? But there really is an issue. I have mental problems, okay? So people ask me often, how is it that I can make a video and charge the customer for that kind of stuff, okay? And so let me explain this, that when I am troubleshooting and when I am working by myself, I talk to myself all the time. I rationalize with myself. I ask myself questions, and that's how I troubleshoot, okay? I work myself through the problems. I'll sit there and, oh, is this, is it that? So it really is no different when I turn on a camera. But with that being said, on the same, point that I'm trying to make, sometimes the stuff that comes out of my mouth is not a complete thought, because it's my head working through a problem. And I realize that that can confuse people, or say, hey, you're incorrect or whatever. And I appreciate all the feedback that I can get from you guys. I really do. Even if you're, trying to teach me to be a better service technician or a better person, whatever, I appreciate all the feedback. So please keep it coming. But just understand something, that oftentimes there may be incomplete thoughts that come out of my head, and I may not give context to a thought. So for instance, I'm going to give you an example. In my last video that I posted last week, I was working on a walk-in cooler, and I was taking off a suction service valve that was a rotolock connection, and it was a steel valve, and I had to unsweat it, and I explained the process. And I ended up cutting the copper out of that valve because I didn't want to have to unsweat the silver solder. We use silver solder on dissimilar metals. So I was using 56% silver solder because we had a steel to a copper connection. So you have to use a high silver bearing solder, okay? 15%, while it may slightly, it's not going to work, okay? Don't do 15% or anything less. Stick with, 45% or up or something like that, okay? But you have to use the proper flux and everything. But anyways, I'm going off on a tangent. I am capable of unsweating and then pushing that valve back on that existing silver solder, but I did mention that it gets to be a pain in the butt, and that is true. I try to avoid any difficulty when it comes to brazing. So the difficult thing, and what I should have clarified in the video when I was saying it, you can clean off the copper, you can heat it up, you can use towels, you can use sandcloth, different things like that to clean off the old silver solder, okay? And then yes, if you clean it up good enough, you can slide the new valve on and you can re-silver solder it and call it a day. But oftentimes when you're heating things up to try to get the solder off, or if you heat up the copper and push the valve on while it's hot, you can actually damage the valve itself. So I prefer not to put any unneeded heat on there. In the situation that I was in, it was just easier for me to go ahead and cut the copper, and that's why I showed how I annealed it, bent it, and made a perfect little fitting for it. I certainly could have gone the other route and made do with what I had, but why do that when it was easy enough to go ahead and take that out and make the process seamless? Because it's even easier to braze that fitting or that rotolock valve onto that copper if it's fresh virgin copper that's clean. You run into more issues if you try to push it onto an existing solder situation and that kind of stuff. So I realize that I probably need to make a better effort. I've kind of been in cruise mode sometimes when it comes to my videos, because it's literally just the random thoughts coming out of my head. And usually it makes for a good video, but there's often times that it's missing context or missing information. So just keep that in mind. I think there was something else that I was talking about with that too. Let me see. I had written down here. Oh yeah, I've got the perfect situation too. So in the video before that, I was doing a leak check on a set of Cook's drawers. And I kind of mentioned that, I'm kind of suspect of there being another leak in the system. And I wouldn't be surprised if there was, but it's not at the evaporators and it's not on the roof. So more than likely it's going to be in the line set. And I wanted to avoid cutting open the ceiling. And then I got a bunch of comments about that. Why would I cut open the ceiling without pressurizing the system with nitrogen first, going through that? And again, it's one of those incomplete thoughts just coming out of my head. Of course, in the situation, if I do have another refrigerant leak on that, the best situation would be to isolate the line set completely. Okay, but that actually will be extremely difficult, but isolate the line set completely and do a pressure test on it. And then once I know 100% sure that the leak is in the line set, then I can start cutting open the ceiling or whatever I have to do to try to find the refrigerant leak. So again, incomplete thoughts. My mouth just spouts, random crap sometimes, and it's not a complete thought and, whatever. I have a video, so I just put it out. So, but please, I really do appreciate the feedback and the advice and the criticisms, so please keep them coming. So whenever I post a video, if you guys think I did something wrong or you think you have a better way that I could do it, of course you don't need to be a punk about it, but reach out to me. You can send me a comment, send me an email, Facebook, all that different stuff, and give me your opinions, because I'm always looking to grow as a service technician. And there has been things that have been said in the comments, and I usually address them on the live stream, where someone gives me a really good idea that I can grow on. So, and I always try to pass those on to people too. So please keep them coming. I really do appreciate all your guys' feedback. And I do have to say, thank you guys all so much for watching my videos and taking the time to leave comments like you do and send emails like you do, because it's awesome. You know, it really does help. It definitely helps because I spend a bunch of time on these. So any kind of feedback or interaction I can have kind of makes it more worth it. You know what I'm saying? To have something, because if you just put out videos, you know, it's kind of can get old. But when you start having feedback and a correspondence with people, it definitely helps, and helps to make me want to keep making these videos. So thank you guys so very much. Okay. All right. Let's see what else we got going on in the chat here. Yeah, if you guys haven't already, please. Oh, right on, dude. Please. I lost my train of thought there right now. So. Let me see what we got going on in the chat. Oh, so that's interesting. So Jason Johnson says that he likes the orange brazing rods, 56% silver, or the blue 45% silver ones. You know, I have had some bad experience with the flux coated brazing rods, and maybe it's just me, because what I started to notice was the flux would actually like fall off of the brazing rods. Maybe it's because they sat in my van too long, and then it was just kind of a pain. So I tend to stick to the little, you know, little container of the silver solder, and then I just use the paste flux, just because I would go to use the brazing rods that have the flux on them, and then the flux would like fall off or chip off, and then it wouldn't get the right amount of flux around it, and I just ran into a problem. But I probably need to try them again. You know, I probably need to try the solder weld ones, because I use the solder weld Silphos, the 15% Silphos, and I really do like that. So maybe I need to try their flux coated brazing rods with like the 56% and try that out too, to see if I can get back into there. But in the past, when those first came out, before solder weld was a thing, some of the other brands came out with the flux coated rods, and I just wasn't a fan, because the flux just kind of chipped off and whatever. So I ended up using, you know, paste flux anyways. So I was like, why am I buying these silly rods if I can just buy the little container of it and stuff? So let me see what else we got in here. Okay, cool. So I'm going to go ahead and get on with the discussion here. So when it comes to the videos, you know, I always post different things inside of there. And one of the topics that I kind of brought up, and I'm looking for your guys' opinions, is a torque wrench. I've never used a torque wrench in my career. I've always just tightened on flare nuts and different things like that. And I said something in my recent video, and I got a few bits of feedback about the different types of digital torque wrenches, and I actually am interested in purchasing one, but I'm curious about the accuracy of the torque wrenches. So I've kind of been doing some research a little bit, and I think I might be getting ready to purchase a torque wrench. I'm also trying to find a torque wrench calibration tool within reason that's not extremely expensive. So I actually did send an email to a calibration tool manufacturer to kind of ask if you can use the adjustable torque wrenches on their tool, because I'm curious about the accuracy of some of these digital torque wrenches too. But what I tend to notice is there's quite a few of the digital torque wrenches that all seem to be very similar, kind of like maybe they're made by the same manufacturer or the same like 2 or 3 manufacturers, and then they're rebranded. I don't know if you guys know, but that actually happens quite a lot in tool manufacturing. Is they will oftentimes go and rebrand a certain manufactured tool or whatever. You can usually tell just by looking at it. You're like, hey, that looks like another brand's, you know? So I'm just kind of curious about the accuracy. So if you guys do have any opinions on digital torque wrenches, I'd love your feedback. Send me an email to hvacrvideos@gmail.com. I'd like to know which ones you guys like, which ones you use, which ones you don't like, you know, what you like about it, what you don't like about it. I'd be kind of curious. Again, never using a torque wrench on flare nuts or anything in my career. I would be kind of curious, because I've learned how tight something needs to be, but I'd like to know the actual, if I'm actually accurate and what I think is a good tightness, and you know what the torque wrench actually says. So I'd be kind of curious about that. So send me an email. Okay, guys. Let me see. Let me mark some stuff off on my list, or I'll get really caught up in forgetting to actually talk about the things I have on here. In the chat before the live stream started, Jason Johnson was actually asking about ultrasonic leak detectors. and he was asking my opinion on them. And it just so happens that my buddy Rick, HVACR Survival, was in the chat. I don't know if he's still in there or not, but Rick actually has some videos about the ultrasonic leak detector. Okay, so my opinion, I tried out one of the ultrasonic leak detectors. I'm not going to throw the brand under the bus, but I tried out one of them, and I wasn't too happy with it. For me, in my niche of stuff that I do working in the restaurants and things, it just wasn't, you know, it just wasn't my thing. What I found, my experience with the ultrasonic leak detector, is that number one, I have some hearing problems. Okay, so I have to turn the volume up really loud, and when I turned up the volume, you would have headphones on. I would hear the fluorescent lights in the room. And fluorescent lights actually make a very interesting sound. So that would distract me. And you could still hear the leak, the refrigerant leaks, because it does make a very distinct sound, but you also hear all the other background noise. If you're in a very, very loud room, I could see where that might be a problem. And actually, when I was trying to use the leak detector, and it may have something to do with my hearing issues, but when I was trying to use the leak detector, I found myself actually having to turn off things. Like I was working in a walk-in cooler, and I had to turn off the fans in the walk-in freezer because all I could hear was that the fans in the other one. Now, I also have, I've talked about it a few times in my videos, I have some sort of a hearing problem where I get distracted by other noises. So if I'm working, trying to do a leak search on something, and there's a whining noise behind me, like all I hear is that whining noise behind me, and it's hard for my mind to focus on what's in front of me. So that's where the ultrasonic leak detector didn't work very well for me. Okay, I'm not saying it's a bad tool, it just wasn't my tool, you know. I could definitely see where it might help. Now, the one thing I didn't get to try with the ultrasonic leak detector, which I kind of wish I would have tried, was to try to listen to bearings. That's an interesting thing to do, to try to listen to the sounds and know when you might have a dry bearing or a bad bearing on something. Kind of wish I would have tried that before I got rid of it. But if you guys want to see some videos with the ultrasonic leak detector, go check out my buddy Rick at HVACR Survival, and you can see what he has going on over there. Now, me personally, let me see. I saw a comment in here real quick. My buddy Ulysses is in here right now. It says, how do I like the new field piece leak detector? You were thinking about that one or the Infocon. Okay, so let's talk about the leak detectors then. So I have been using the new field piece DR82, which is an infrared leak detector. Okay. I really, really like that leak detector. Now, let me also say that I have the Infocon Detect Stratus, okay, which is Infocon's top-of-the-line leak detector. It has cloud hunting mode and all this different stuff. Now, let's explain something about the Infocon Detect Stratus. It's got too many names, actually, but anyways, it is a infrared leak detector that also has a cloud hunting mode, okay? The cloud hunting mode gives you the ability, if you're working in a supermarket rack room. Now, I don't do that kind of stuff, but this is perfect for a rack room, okay? If you walk into a rack room that has a rather large refrigerant leak, it may be difficult to pinpoint that leak. So you can put the Detect Stratus in cloud hunting mode, and then the parts per million readout comes up, and it gives you a numerical number to kind of look so you can hone in on the refrigerant leak, okay? Now, some things you need to consider if you're walking into an equipment room that has a leak that big, okay? Vice versa, or, you know, in the past, you would turn on your leak detector and it would just go crazy and you'd have to go in there and try to find the leak, but you've got equipment running that's loud, whatever, so it can be hard. Something to remember, though, too, whenever you're walking into a situation, now Ulysses works on some big stuff with like ammonia and stuff. That's a whole different thing, but he regularly, when he works in the ammonia, will have to put on breathing apparatus. Something to think about. If you're having to walk into a mechanical room and you're having to go into cloud hunting mode because the leak is so big, we're talking about normal refrigerant now, you really should have some sort of breathing apparatus on too, because if your leak detector is going crazy and you have to put it in cloud hunting mode to hone in on it, you got to think that's probably not very good for you to be breathing in too. Okay, so something to think about. You don't want to get the oxygen displaced in your lungs or anything like that when it comes to refrigerants and different things. So be very cautious about that. Okay, but anyways, I'm going off on a tangent. The Detect Stratus has the cloud hunting mode, and it gives you a ppm readout. I want to clarify something for many people out there, because when I used the new field piece leak detector, I said it has a numerical readout, and there was a few comments saying, well, I wish it had the ppm readout. Okay. When it comes to the Detect leak detector, when you put it in cloud hunting mode, the part that has the ppm readout, where it gives you the parts per million readout of the refrigerant, right? that's actually less sensitive than the pinpoint mode on the Detect Stratus, okay? So if you want the most sensitivity and the most accuracy when it comes to finding leaks, you actually take it off of the cloud hunting mode and put it on the regular pinpoint mode or whatever they call it, okay? So keep that in mind. So the Field Piece came out with a new infrared leak detector, the DR82. It is a really nice leak detector. Been using it for a few weeks now. Now, full disclosure, I've talked about it before. I am a beta tester for Field Piece, and I try some of their new tools before, so I usually get my hands on them for a very long time, so I have a pretty good opinion about them. The DR82 leak detector, I did not beta test that leak detector. Now, I was part of the groups and saw the guys using it and got to communicate with them, but I've only had my hands on the DR82 for about 3 weeks now, I think. And it's a great leak detector. In fact, I did get to use it one time in the beta test mode, way in its infancy, but it wasn't something that I kept using, okay? So it's got a hypersensitive mode on it called turbo mode. So they have 4 modes on it: low, medium, high, and then turbo. I think they tell you to normally leak detect on high mode, and it's super great on that. Now, I put it in the turbo mode when you can't find a leak, and I swear to you that thing will pick up leaks that that you don't even know, or you'll spend time trying to find them with the bubbles, because it's like, oh my gosh, it drives you nuts. How do I think the Field Piece leak detector compares to the Infocon Stratus? As far, in my opinion, and the limited use that I've had with, because I've been using the Stratus for longer than I have the Field Piece leak detector, I think they're pretty neck and neck as far as finding refrigerant leaks. It's a very good leak detector. Where the Field Piece differs a little bit from the Stratus is that it has that lighted tip. I really like the lighted tip on the Field Piece leak detector, because for me, when someone that's a little hard of hearing, it's nice to be able to look down and see the little tip lighting up to help you to indicate. Now, it does have a numerical readout, but it's not a parts per million readout, okay? So I think it's a great leak detector so far, and I haven't had any complaints, to say the least, about it. I did run into some issues in my recent video where I forgot to charge it. I had to, so you've got all the same stuff. One thing I do like about it, just little things that kind of irk me, I know I'm kind of anal about stuff, is the charging port is a USB-C, which I really like. One thing I don't like about the Stratus is I'm almost positive the Stratus is not a USB-C. I think it's a different style USB connector. And so I really like the simplicity of that, because I use Android phones and it's the same charger that I have for my phone. So it's just convenient for me. I know that's a silly thing, but it's those things that kind of set things apart for me. And like I've said before, I'm a huge fan of not reading manuals. So I just like to turn things on and see how intuitive they are. And I've yet to read a single manual with the Field Piece leak detector. Turned it on, kind of worked through it. Now, when I say I don't like reading manuals, I love watching videos on tools and things like that. But I don't know, there's just something about me reading an actual manual. It can get kind of frustrating. So I like to give it an opportunity with the tool before I start reading the manuals. I want to use it. Now, of course, you get into some crazy tools and you need to read the manual and stuff like that. But yeah, anyways. But yeah, I really like the Field Piece DR82. Now, that is their infrared. That is the top of the line leak detector. They also have a heated diode leak detector. Off the top of my head, I think it's the DR58, I think. I have not used that one, but I've heard good things about it too. Now, my opinions on the heated diode versus the infrared. I've used heated diode in the past. It's been a long time since I've had a heated diode leak detector. The last few that I've had have been the infrared. The leak detector that I've been using before the Stratus or the Field Piece was the Detect Select, which I used for a good 10 years. And then before that, I had a few other ones. CPS Leak Seeker, the yellow looking thing that always broke the wands on it. That was a whole thing. But yeah, I mean, it's really about preference. The heated diode, I don't have a lot of experience with them. I have used them in the past. I've always been an infrared person, and they've done me really well. I know a lot of people swear by the H10. I've never used a H10 in my career, so, I have nothing bad or good to say about it. I saw some super chats coming in here. Thank you guys so very much. Let's see, Scott, HVAC Rookie, and the 98 DeVille. You guys, I really appreciate those. Those are awesome. You guys are awesome. Please smash the thumbnail or thumbs up button. And yes, I know I'm growing my hair out, so... All right, now that I'm out of breath, because I tend to do that. Sometimes I go off on a tangent and I forget to breathe. Sometimes I forget to breathe. That was actually a joke from a radio show that I used to listen to. Mark and Brian, they were a Southern California radio station, and they had a sketch that they did where the guy was said, "Sometimes I forget to breathe." It's always something that makes me laugh. Okay. Let me see what I'm missing in the chat. See if I'm missing anything special here. Do me a favor, guys. If you haven't already, before I forget, go subscribe to Sporlin's YouTube channel. Sporlin Video is the name of the YouTube channel. They've got great content on their website. They're always posting cool stuff. And, you know, sometimes you'll see some of their stuff might be like supermarket related, but check it out, listen to it, because it actually will give you some great information, even if it's supermarket related. It always has great little nuggets of information on there. And full disclaimer, you guys know Sporlin is actually a sponsor of my channel, but I really do love the content that they put out. So please go check it out and subscribe to their YouTube channel if you haven't already. I just threw a link in the show notes right now. So Jason Johnson, yes, it was 95.5 KLOS was the Mark and Brian show. Grew up listening to them with my dad. So, no worries, man. You guys, I try to be as honest as possible about the stuff that I use. And I also want to say too, you know, not knocking any other creators and stuff. Everybody has their own way of doing things. Okay. My style is different than everybody else's style. We have guys all over the country, up in Canada, different Australia, different parts of the world, people making YouTube content. And the cool thing is that you can get different perspectives on everything, and everybody does something a little different. Okay. My style, I don't really push products that I don't have a lot of experience with. Okay. And I also am a little bit hesitant about trying certain products too. Okay. So, you know, if I bring on a channel sponsor, you know, if I work with Field Piece, it doesn't mean that I'm endorsing every single one of their products. Okay. I usually talk about one specific product, and I try to be as honest as possible, but I also don't like to bash people either. Okay. You know, for instance, I'm going to tell you the truth, with the ultrasonic leak detector. So I've always battled back and forth when it comes to my channel about people sending me free tools. I've always kind of gone back and forth and had a hard time with it. I have accepted some tools, but the ultrasonic leak detector manufacturer reached out to me. This was like 3 years ago or something like that. They reached out to me and they were like, "Hey, we want you to use our tool on our channel, on your channel, we'll send you one." And I kind of went back and forth, and I decided to let them send it to me. I used it for about 2 months, and I called them back and I said, "Look, I don't want to talk crap about your product, but I honestly can't find anything good to say about it." So I said, "I'd like to send you back your leak detector, and let's just not even make a video." And that's what happened, the truth about it, okay? So I would rather just send it back and not say anything negative at all than to come out and be the person that just says, "This is the worst tool ever." Now, with that being said, I do have a tools channel, HVACR Tools, that I'm doing with my buddies, and we will be critics, you know, we will pick a tool and we will tell you the good and bad things we like about it. But if I just flat out hate a tool, I'm not going to make a video about it. Okay. But I'm going to be honest about it. Okay. I'll tell you like, "Hey, you know what? I don't like this." So, you know, there was some criticism that I gave about the Testo manifold, you know, the new one that came out. There was good things about it and bad things about it. So I have no problem being honest about that. But yeah, I just, you know, if I just flat out don't like a tool, I'm just not even going to use it in a video because, it's silly or whatever. You know, I just don't want to bash people for no reason. So, but again, thank you guys. Wink HVAC, thank you so much for that super chat, man. I really appreciate it. Okay. Let's see. Arizona HVAC. It says you have a customer that order a walk-in cooler from a used company. It's 20 by 20 by 16 big box. They sent Heatcraft evap unit, 12,000 BTUs. Seems small for this big box. Arizona HVAC, you need to do a load calculation. You can go to Russell. You can go to Russell's new load calculation program is called Rapid Spec, I think. And it's like Ream, Russell, all that different stuff. You can go to Heatcraft. You can go to Trenton. There's a few other ones that have free refrigeration load calculation software on their websites. Send me an email if you can't find the ones, but look up Rapid Spec by Ream, I think is what it is. And do a load calculation based off of the inside dimensions of the box, based off of the thickness of the walls, the ambient temperatures outside, the infiltrating air from the kitchen, and find out what size equipment you actually need, okay? You don't want to guess and just throw in what someone sends you, Be very cautious about that, okay? I have customers that order their own equipment too, and before I install it, I will typically do my own load calculation just to verify before I go through all the headaches and become the official owner of that equipment, you know? So be very cautious about that kind of stuff and always do your load calculations. Now, I've said it, I've still been kind of running into some hiccups and some hurdles, but I am currently working on a video where I'm going to do a full load calculation process and show you what I go through to size everything and come up with some things you need to consider and line sizing and different stuff like that. So that will be coming out in the future, but it's going to be a while because just, again, we're running into some hurdles with it, but it'll come out soon, okay? Let me see what else we got in here. What am I missing? Okay, cool. Is there a good digital alternative to electromechanical defrost timers, the Flying Farmer? You know, some people really, really like the new Paragon digital timers. So Paragon's made defrost clocks for years. One of the most popular ones is the 8145 series. They have a 115 and a 208 volt. So the 814520 is actually the 208 volt. That is a mechanical defrost clock. They actually came out with a fully digital model. Forgive me, I don't know the model number of it, but just look up Paragon digital defrost clock and it'll come up. I don't have a lot of experience with it, but a lot of people do swear by it. It's multi-volt and different things like that. Some people really love that thing. There's times that I really like a digital clock. There's times that I really like a mechanical. It really depends on the situation. I will go between the 814520 and the DTAV 40, which is the Graslin mechanical defrost clock. And then sometimes I'll go to Key to Therm and use their temp plus defrost controllers or their low temp controllers. So it really depends on the situation. More and more though, lately I've been going to the digital stuff, the Key to Therm temp plus defrost controller, and then the Key to Therm low temp controller. I've been going a little bit more to that kind of stuff, but there's downsides to using digital too. So one of the upsides to using mechanical, or the ones that actually have a clock face on them, like the Paragon Digital, is sometimes if you're working on walk-in cooler equipment, you can put longer defrosts in the middle of the night. So sometimes when you're working in restaurant situations, you know, the customer may be very hard on their equipment and it may be prone to icing up because they leave doors open and different things like that. So what's nice about like a Graslin clock is that I can put like a 2-hour defrost in the middle of the night when nobody's in the building on the walk-in cooler, and the doors are shut and everything, so the box temp won't come up that high. And then you could do normal defrost throughout the day. When it comes to using like a Key to Therm temp plus defrost controller, you can't do that because you basically set intervals. You know, you can only do so many defrosts a day for so much time, and that's it. So that's one of the downsides to going with the digital types. But again, that Paragon one, again, I don't know the number on it, but it looks like a normal defrost clock. That one you can set longer defrosts at different times throughout the day. So that is kind of a nice thing to do. All right, let's see, I already answered that question. I'm just going to mark off my list real quick. So Samuel had sent me, I think it was an email or a comment, I can't remember, and he asked me my opinion. He's in school and he's getting ready to start in the trade, and he wanted to know my opinion on digital gauges, what types to use. Okay, so he's been learning on analog in school and he wants to get a set of digital gauges. And he wanted to know if I recommended going the probe route or the gauge route. Okay, so for what I do, everybody's a little bit different, okay? For what I do, if I was given a choice and I could only pick one, I would go with an actual digital manifold, okay? Now, I probably use my field piece job link probes more than I use my manifold, but there's times that manifold really comes in clutch and really helps me out. So if given the choice between the two, if I could only choose one, I would probably say to start with the digital manifold, and when you can afford it, go to the probes. Now, I use the probes and the manifold regularly at different situations. If I know I'm walking up to a walk-in cooler where I'm going to be charging it, I'm probably going to break out the manifold because it's just a little bit more convenient for me, maybe because I'm old school and I started on compound gauges. It's just easier for me to charge with the manifold. But I've said it many times too, when I'm working on air conditioning systems, I will tend to jump for my probes because most air conditioners, you got to put your gauges on and then shut the panels, and that's really convenient to have probes without hoses sticking out of the AC or things like that. So I like them both, and I think everybody needs eventually to have probes and a manifold, especially in refrigeration. But, you know, certainly there's people that are super comfortable with working with just probes too. So, you know, I think to each their own when it comes to that one. Let me see what else we got going on here. What size wire do I keep on my truck for redoing high voltage? So I have 12 gauge wire sitting on my truck at all times because I go through 12 gauge. 12 gauge pretty much does everything for me when it comes to refrigeration repairs and stuff. Now, you know, if I'm working on bigger stuff, we'll have to go get some 10 gauge. I have 10 gauge sitting in the shop, but 12 and 10 are the two most common wire sizes that I use working on what I work on. Okay. But I don't work on big giant walk-in freezer equipment. I work on, you know, 5 horsepower and below, most of the time 3 horsepower and below. So yeah, I keep 12 gauge for 480 volts. So I have brown, yellow, and orange 500-foot rolls of those on my truck. And then I also have blue, red, black for, you know, 208 volt systems. I'm talking 3-phase. And then obviously ground wire. And then I keep 12 gauge, I'm sorry, 10 gauge at the shop. But yeah, number 10 is what, or number 12 is what I keep on my truck at all times. And then I usually have, I don't know, 100-foot of SO cord or SJO cord or whichever one it is. I always get mixed up on those, but I usually carry 14 gauge SJ cord or SO cord and carry, you know, 100-foot of that, 50-foot of that, something like that. Because I go through that stuff quite often too. So, all right. Have I seen a walk-in evaporator with both bad motors? Yeah, but I can't think of a situation right now to elaborate on that one. Let me see. Let's see. TrueTech is out of stock on both the DR58 and the DR82. Yeah, I've been selling the hell out of those things, so people are probably going to kill it on their stock right now. But yeah, a lot of people, you know, because Field Piece really hit the ground running because they were working with a few content creators and then they started promoting on their own. So the hype was pretty high for those leak detectors. So when you can get your hands on one, you're going to really like them. They do a really good job. Same thing with their new vacuum pump, the VPX7, the 10 CFM. I've been using that. Now that I did beta test and that thing kicks butt. I actually did a job. I haven't made the video on it, but I happen to have 2 of those 10 CFM pumps. It worked out perfect because I was working on a 15-ton split system and I was able to evacuate both circuits at the same time. And that really helped me out by having 2 of those 10 CFM pumps. Of course, using it with the true blue hoses, so I got the full capacity of the vacuum pump. Something you want to think about. I don't know the exact numbers, but if you're using your 1/4-inch hoses with your vacuum pump, you might as well go buy a 1 CFM pump because the amount of flow you're going to get through a 1/4-inch hose with a Schrader, with a Schrader depressor in it is going to be like less than 1 CFM. So it doesn't matter what size pump you put on the other side of it. So if you guys really want to step up your vacuum game, you really need to consider getting into the bigger hose sizes, whether it be through Appion hoses or True Blue hoses. There's a couple different manufacturers that make the bigger hoses, but the bigger you go, the more flow you're going to get through that hose. So keep that in mind, okay? You know, using that Field Piece 10 CFM pump with a compound gauge set with 1/4-inch hoses is kind of silly because it's not going to do anything. You might as well be using a, you know, tiny pump. So something to think about. Food for thought, I guess you can say. So, let's see. Someone had emailed me asking me about a video that I made where I worked on the Cook's drawers, and they were asking what the perfect setting for the Hvacr drawer units when it came to temperature and defrost settings. It really depends, bud. When it comes to setting up the temperature and the defrost strategy, it depends on the customer. Hvacr, if it's a medium temperature system for their drawer units, especially the old school. With the blue, it's a little bit different. If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, you don't work on the blue. But the blue is like a glycol unit. But the original Hvacr units, the prep tables and different things like that, they would set their controllers, the temperature of the box to 37 degrees with a 3-degree differential. So it'd be 37, 38, 39, 40. It would turn on, come down to 37. It would range between 37 and 40. That did really well. And I still try to maintain whatever the manufacturer set their boxes up accordingly, okay? And it all depends on the types of coils that they have them and different things like that. The fins per inch spacing on the evaporator coils affects how quick they frost up and how, you know, often you have to defrost it and stuff. So when it came to the defrost settings on the Hvacrs, actually the refrigerated bases, you typically didn't have to do much of a defrost on them because of that higher than norm or that 40-degree cut-in temperature. You got to remember something, that when it comes to refrigeration equipment, even though your box temperature is above freezing, right? Let's say we maintain the box temperature between 37 and 40. The box temp is above freezing, but the evaporator coil temperature is oftentimes going to be much lower. Typically lower than 10 degrees too, because oftentimes on the reach-in coolers, they would do the evaporator TDs rather high to try to bring the box temperature down to fast really quick. So you might see a TD, evaporator TD, of like 15 degrees on some of those things. So that means that evaporator temperature is getting 15 degrees below the box temperature. And if you're setting it at 37 degrees, that means it's going to be 15 degrees below that. So it's going to be much lower than freezing. So you have to keep that in mind, that the coil temperature is going to be below freezing. And that's why we have to use defrost on the medium temperature stuff. Now, there was an old school mentality that you didn't have to use defrost on medium temperature walk-ins and different things like that. But that's kind of untrue, especially with the way that customers leave doors open, reach-in doors open, walk-in doors open, all that stuff. It really is a need to have proper defrost strategies set up, and it's really going to depend on the situation in which you're working in, okay? So in a perfect world, like on the Cook's drawers that I worked on, I'd like to see maybe a 15-minute defrost every 4 hours on that box, and then usually in the middle of the night, I'll do an hour or two from like 2 to 3 or 4 in the morning, where it shuts down the entire box with the drawers all shut and everything like that, to try to get rid of any frost. And then boom, by the time they open, you never want to do anything more on a reach-in cooler than like a 20-minute defrost during the day. And you even want to do that to a minimum too, because with them opening and closing the drawers and then it goes into a defrost, it's going to bring those box temperatures and the product temperature really high. So you want to be very cautious about that. And another thing too is you always want to keep your customer in the loop about the defrost times too. That way you don't get nuisance service calls. Sometimes I've seen some of my customers that were very proactive, and they would actually put like a sticky note on the unit with a label maker or whatever and say what times it goes into defrost, so that way they knew not to call me during those times if you know, it was during the middle of the day or something. So would I ever consider using the Zoom Lock push to connect fittings? Randy Laz. For me, I don't have a use for the Zoom Lock push to connect fittings in the stuff that I do, except for I haven't been able to use this, but I do think that the Zoom Lock push to connect fitting will serve a really good purpose when you're working on R290 equipment. Now, before you freak out, think about what I say. If you're working on R290 equipment and, you know, the manufacturer oftentimes won't send service ports on that equipment. So I've shown it in my videos where if it's under warranty, you got to follow their specs and all that stuff. You'll oftentimes have to braze on connections. And then when you're all done, you'll have to unsweat those connections and pinch it off and weld it shut. So I thought it'd be kind of cool to use the push to connect fitting. Instead of brazing that connection on, you can just use the push to connect fitting. And then maybe when you're all done, right, and you want to close it up, have another one set up to where it has a crimped off, you know, piece of copper that's already been welded shut, and you just push it on there. Maybe when you're all done, and you leave it that way with no refrigerant connection port, right? Because some of those push to connect fittings are actually removable. You can actually put them on and take them off, but you have to buy the special one. So that was my thought when you're working on the R290. Instead of having to braze that last connection with the R290 on the other side of your pinch off tool, why not pinch it off, then use the push to connect fitting, and then call it a day, because it's a leak-free thing. But then, so anyways, we'll see. I haven't tried it yet, but that was kind of my thought, and I have some sitting in the truck just waiting for a job to try them on. So, all right. Let's see. Cyborg Sheep, you have a leaking carrier split system. Where do I do a leak search? What would you need? Where would you look? Anywhere there's a refrigerant connection, bud. I mean, it could be outside at the outdoor unit. It could be inside. I mean, it's hard to say. There's so many different places that it could be leaking. So, yeah, that's a hard one for me to tell you. Have I ever repaired a leak that is on a line behind a wall? I mean, yeah, you run a new line set or something. Yeah, I've had to cut walls open to access portions of it too and make a leak repair. So yeah, I've done it. Adam has a compressor, and he emailed me. He was kind of confused about it because he doesn't have any resistance across the terminals, right? But it's not hot. And he was confused because, you know, he's basically thinking like, if we have no resistance across the terminals from winding to winding, but the compressor has power and it's not hot, he's confused on what's going on there. So more than likely, Adam, you've got a bad connection point on the inside of the compressor, or the thermal overload has failed open to where it's not resetting. Okay. Oftentimes and it's a scroll compressor, by the way, too. So oftentimes on the scroll compressors, they'll have a thermal overload on the inside of the compressor that will open up, depending on if it's single phase or three phase, the lines. Okay. And if that thermal overload fails, or the little plug, I don't think I have one right here. Oh, I do. Hold on. So I've got the inside of a scroll compressor right here. This thing's heavy, but this is the inside of the fusite plug right here. So you notice that it actually has another plug right on the inside where the terminals would connect on the outside. Now, it's very, very rare that this could happen, but this theoretically could have come unplugged too on the inside of the compressor, and you're no longer sensing the actual motor windings anymore. So that thing is heavy. If you guys ever, I encourage everybody out there, and actually, I was inspired by my buddy Ulysses that was in the chat earlier, Ulysses Palacios. I believe I pronounced your name right, Ulysses. Sorry if I didn't. But Ulysses has a YouTube channel, and he inspired me because he used to post a lot of stuff on there, and the dude would cut open compressors all the time and really got the wheels turning in my head. And it really got me to start cutting open compressors too. And that was from a scroll compressor that I was curious about. So if you guys haven't already, and you have the tools, you need to be safe and be careful. I encourage everybody out there, if you change a compressor, take it home, spend some time on the weekend, pour the oil out, cut that thing open, start cutting open all the compressors that you can that are bad. And please don't do it to good ones. And start learning how compressors fail. Learn what copper plating is. Look for the failure points, because it helps you to understand and realize what's going on inside that compressor. So what I do, I'll take a compressor, I'll drain the oil out. I've learned where to cut the scroll compressors to where you can get them apart the easiest. And then I will, if I want to like save them for keepsakes and whatever to show things, I'll actually soak them in degreaser, put them in a bucket of degreaser, and then let them sit for a couple days, then take them and rinse them. You'll have to do a couple times and dry them off before they start to rust, the components. And then you have perfectly good components that you can just, show to other technicians and different things like that. Let me see what else. I just seen a super chat. Jose, thank you so very much for that super chat, man. You guys in these super chats, it's awesome. Thank you very much. Okay. So, Reyes, I don't know if I pronounced your name wrong. I believe it was your screen name or your name. It was Reyes, R-A-Y-A-Z. He asked about topping off R410A, and he was kind of concerned because he noticed in some of my videos, because sometimes I'll get this question quite often where someone say, I thought that was a blend and you're not supposed to top off a blend. Okay, so when it comes to 410A, 410A is a near azeotropic blend. Okay, so it is a blend of different refrigerants, but it has a very small glide on it. And in the very beginning, when 410A was becoming very popular, there was a lot of hype about how easy it was to make the gas fractionate. And, they use these big words that scared everybody. I have not had any issues with fractionization. Now, when it comes to that being said, Reyes's question was, at what point do you change the refrigerant in the system? Okay. It really depends. If I walk up to a system and I find that it has a very small leak, whether it be on the high side or the low side, and I recover the charge, and there's still gas in there, and it only leaked out a pound or two of a 10-pound charge, I'm not too worried about it, okay? Where I'd really start to think about changing all the refrigerant is if I saw something where it like leaked out half the charge or something like that, then I would probably lean towards changing the refrigerant. Now, some other things you need to think about when it comes to using new virgin refrigerant is there any possibility of contamination? Sometimes on the refrigeration side, you can have pressure controls that are sticking. You can have leaks on the low side of the system. The system runs into a vacuum because of a plugged up capillary tube. It starts sucking air into the refrigerant. There's all kinds of things. You have to use your common sense. Okay. That's when I would definitely change the refrigerant. But when I'm working on an air conditioning system, if I recover the refrigerant and there's more than half of it in there, I'm probably not going to change the refrigerant. Again, it just depends on the situation. If it's a burnout, if there's contamination, acid contamination, of course, I'm going to change the refrigerant. Okay. So it really depends on every situation. All right. I already covered that one. I already answered that question. I already answered that question. Cool. I'm working through these questions pretty good. Oh, so this was Dave. Dave had asked me a question about charging to the proper liquid level. So I get a lot of confusion and a lot of questions about this, where I'll show myself checking the liquid level in a receiver, and then people are all confused, like, why am I checking the liquid level? Hold on, let me look at something here real quick. I swear, it just like heats up in my office so quick. And then I find out that someone messed with the thermostat. So I'm looking at my thermostat right now. Nope. All right. Nobody messed with the thermostat. It's just downright hot in my office. With all this equipment and the lights and everything, it gets hot in here quick. So when I'm working on a refrigeration system, if you ever see me checking the liquid level on a receiver, that means that the system has a head pressure control valve. I'm not going to go crazy into this, but head pressure control valves, they're there to keep the pressures in the system at a certain level to help to make the expansion valve work properly. That's the easiest way to explain it. With that being said, a head pressure control valve needs extra refrigerant in the system. They call it the flooded charge or the winter charge. We are not implying by saying winter charge that you have to take gas out in the winter and put it in the summer or vice versa, okay? They just call it the winter charge because it typically is used when it's colder outside, okay, which is typically the winter. But with that being said, there's a couple different methods of putting the correct amount of refrigerant in a refrigeration system that has a head pressure control valve, a sight glass, and a receiver. Key points right there, okay? There's a couple different methods to doing so. Lean on the manufacturer. They might have the information for you. You can look up the Sporlan Bulletin 90-30-1, or you can use the hacky way of doing it like I do, where sometimes when you're out in the field, you got to do what you got to do. So I'll put the maximum amount of refrigerant in the system, and that's pumped down 3/4 of the receiver. Okay. So I'll check the liquid level, and you'll often see me using a thermal imaging camera to show where the liquid level is when it's pumped down. Now, you don't have to have a thermal imaging camera to check that liquid level. You can actually use your fingers. You pump the system down, you take a heat producing device that doesn't exceed the safety temperature of the receiver, and you heat up the receiver while it's pumped down, up and down, and then you just run your fingers, the back of your fingers, up the receiver, and where it gets hot, that's the liquid level. You'll feel a noticeable temperature difference. So you don't have to have a thermal imaging camera for it. The thermal imaging camera helps you to be a little bit more precise with it, but you can clear. I mean, I grew up in the trade using just the back of my hand, just feeling the liquid level at the receiver. But again, that heat producing device cannot exceed the safety temperature of that receiver. So be very cautious about that, okay? I had a question about old parts. Do I give old parts to the customers? Okay. It really depends on the customer. I train my employees to always offer the parts to the customers until you gain that trust. Always. Okay. Even to this day, even customers that I know that trust me, sometimes if there's, you can tell they're just going to be a pain or something like that, I will always offer up the parts. I'll usually leave them in a box right by the office and say, here's the old parts. You can save them for your Christmas tree. It's always a joke that I say. And I just do that, okay? It keeps the honest people honest, makes people happy. But yeah, I do often return the parts to the customer just to let them know that I actually did do something, okay? Mark this one off. I'm going to go to the chat real quick and see what I'm missing in here. Have I seen a walk-in cooler, walk-in coil iced up right after the system came out of defrost? Bud, yeah, yes, but that's, yeah. Let me see what else we got in here. Again, thank you so much for the super chats, guys, okay? All right, I don't see anything else. Make sure if you guys do have questions, you put them in caps lock, okay? I should change my company to Big Picture HVACR. Yeah, nah. All right. To be honest with you, I've completely separated my videos from my business. There's a few of my customers that know that I make videos, but for the most part, I actually keep a pretty good separation just to not draw any unwanted attention to my company. Now, I realize, but that's why, you don't always see my company name in my videos. I've been a little bit more relaxed with it lately, but especially in the beginning, I used to keep my company name out of my videos 100%, just because there's some people that would just get upset with the attention. And what you also don't know is the general public, what they think is nasty and what actually is nasty is two different things. So I just try to keep, to the best of my ability, the company name out of my videos. So, what are the symptoms of a failed discharge pressure regulator? Discharge pressure regulator. I don't know what you mean by that, dude. Miguel Martinez. Send me an email, man. A failed discharge pressure regulator. I don't know if I'm just having a brain fart or what, but I don't know what you mean by a failed discharge pressure regulator. Yeah, send me an email to hvacrvideos@gmail.com. We can talk a little bit more. Let me see. Oh, this is a really good one. Okay, I had a bunch of people comment about this. So in my walk-in cooler video, I was tightening the rotolock nut onto the compressor, and you notice that I had my other technician go and hold the valve so that way I could tighten them down. I was not using channel locks, guys. I was using the Knipex pliers wrench. Okay, and yes, I did say Knipex because that is actually how it's pronounced. If you go to Knipex website and look at how the owners of the people that work at the company pronounce it, you'll actually see that I've actually found one video where a Knipex employee called them Nipix, but most of the videos you'll see they do pronounce the K, Knipex, okay? It sounds silly, but that's actually how they're supposed to be, or how they pronounce it in Germany or wherever it's made. But anyways, going off on a tangent. So I was using Knipex pliers and I was tightening down. And some people noticed that when I was trying, and actually I was trying to loosen the rotolock at first. That's when they saw what they thought I was doing wrong. So I went to go loosen the rotolock and I was, pulling the pliers, and I went the opposite direction, like I was tightening the nut. And people said, oh, they're making a joke that, I have the whole thing where I accidentally go the wrong way on nuts. And I do occasionally, but actually in that time, I was going the wrong way when I was trying to loosen that nut on purpose. What you also didn't see, I don't think I showed it in the video, was I will typically, if I have to, if it won't work, I'll take something hard, like a set of lineman pliers or something, and I'll usually tap on the nut all the way around. Sometimes I'll take some rust buster or some kind of penetrating oil and put it on the nut, let it sit for a minute. I think that I did in that case. And then I'll go to loosen it. And if it doesn't loosen, I'll actually tighten on the nut. Because if you take that nut and you move it back and forth, you can actually break it free easier. So sometimes I will tighten on it just a little bit to get some movement going, and then I'll go to loosen it and it'll come off easier. So in that situation, I was purposely going the wrong direction because I wanted to try to tighten it to break it free. Okay, because sometimes if you can get movement to tighten it just a little bit, that's enough that you can get the movement to loosen it going too. So it does happen. Sometimes you have to go back and forth a little bit. All right. Again. Okay. So, let's see. I already answered that question. I'm going down the list right now, and I answered that question. So I did want to address something, and, actually, you know what? I'm not even going to go there right now. 410A. Someone did ask me a question about 410A, and they asked me if 410A was being phased out. And yes, let's make it known right now. Any of the refrigerants, pretty much any of the refrigerants we are working with today, 410A, CO2, all these different ones, at some point, all those refrigerants are going to be phased out one way or another, okay? Or more restrictions or more limitations, all this different stuff, okay? So keep that in mind. Over your careers, they're going to phase out a lot of different refrigerants. 410A has been on the chopping block since it was introduced, guys. Every one of these refrigerants, the 448A we're using in refrigeration, that's on the chopping block too. Every refrigerant out there is on the chopping block one way or another. And don't think they're not going to phase out the natural refrigerants too, because when the yuppie people get involved in this stuff, trust me, okay? In order to get propane R290, you got to dig for oil. People hate oil, right? So they're going to phase out everything they can until there's no toxic substances whatsoever being used. CO2, they're complaining about it doing greenhouse gases and all that. I don't know, all kinds of crazy stuff. I try not to get too involved in the political side, but just understand that pretty much every refrigerant out there, they're phasing out. Next thing you know, they're going to phase out water, okay? Because, oh yeah, who knows, whatever. Because water's a refrigerant too. So they're phasing everything out, guys. All right. Let's get in here. Yeah, don't show the company name. Yeah, Ernesto knows that one from experience, huh? What type of thermostat do I have? In my house, I have a Honeywell 9000, but hold on. Check this out. I actually am going to, I've had this sit in my office for a couple weeks now. I've got a Sensi Predict right here that I picked up from True Tech Tools. And that actually came with the new Sensi whatever touchscreen thermostat. I bought it from, like I said, I bought it from TrueTech Tools, but I was kind of curious about the Sensi Predict, so I'm actually going to install that one of these days too, on my house and replace my Honeywell 9000 with that. So that's a White Rogers, whatever, White Rogers. It's all Emerson, you know, all that crap. So, but I was kind of curious about the Sensi Predict because it has all that information. You can look on the website and you can see the predictive data and all that stuff. So I love data, so I bought that, and one of these days I'll install it. Let me see. Have I already answered that one? Does a single stage unit need to have Y2 connected if it has an economizer? Mr. Green, great question. So if you're setting up an economizer, depending on the type of economizer, it could benefit you to connect Y2. But it really depends. Now, when I say it could benefit you to connect Y2, if you have a single stage compressor, depending on the economizer setup, sometimes you can wire in the compressor on the second stage so that it always tries the economizer first, and you could get a, but in that situation, you wouldn't have Y2 hooked up from the thermostat necessarily, okay? So depending on the type of economizer, you can set up an economizer to where it'll try with the economizer damper first, then it'll try with mechanical cooling, and then it might do both together. So you can still get mechanical cooling, but you can also bring in outside air so it runs the compressor for less time too. So, but no, not necessarily. You do not necessarily have to connect Y2 if you have a single stage system with an economizer, but you might wire it up in a way to where there's not a Y2 running to a thermostat. But again, it just depends on the economizer setup and how you can program it from inside the module. Hopefully I didn't confuse you completely on that one. I look less mean with long hair. Well, dude, I can't have that. Hold on. I have a reputation to uphold, and that's that I look like an asshole. So thanks for letting me know, Ernesto, and I'll make sure I wear the hat at all times. No, I'm just kidding. I wanted to try something different. I've had a shaved head for 20 years, it seems like. So, Cyborg Chic, thank you so very much for that super chat, bud. So it says you found an old washing machine motor someone was getting rid of and tested it today, and it was still working. Going to build an electric scooter. Hey, that's pretty cool. It's always fun to try to repurpose stuff. It's neat when you can fabricate and different things like that. What's my opinion on Copeland digital scroll compressors, the cooler guys? So I think they're great. I was actually just watching a video or something like that where someone was talking about Copeland X-Line series condensing units. If you guys don't know what they are, Copeland X-Line series condensing units, they're made for refrigeration. They look like a mini split condenser, but it actually will have inverter-driven compressors, digital scrolls in them, some of them depending on the ones. And the concept behind a digital scroll is great. And the cool thing about a digital scroll is if it's set up right, you can have a multiplex system, right? You can have a refrigeration rack with a single compressor that controls 3 or 4 different regions. But the problem with doing that is that the compressor is sized for all the regions to run at the same time. So if only one of the regions is running, depending on the size of the regions, that compressor could be wasting a lot of energy and having a hard time in short cycling because only one circuit is calling. If you have a digital compressor and it's set up right, that digital compressor can slow down almost to 20% of capacity and be able to run a single region and not waste a bunch of energy. So the concept behind digital compressors, I think, is great. Now, where I run into problems, and the cooler guys, I know you're here in Southern California too, where you guys might run into problems, I don't know if you're in an area, is we have a lot of power issues where I'm at. We have a lot of power outages, low voltage, high voltage, well, not so much high voltage, but we have low voltage issues. My biggest gripe with any of the cool new technological advances when it comes to VFDs, inverters, different stuff like that, is the poor power conditioning my buildings typically have on them. They don't typically have power conditioning modules that say, hey, the voltage is low, let's shut off this equipment, or that kind of stuff. So digital compressors, I think, are great if they have proper power conditioning, things that are monitoring the voltage to make sure it doesn't get to a level where it starts to damage the components of the compressor. I worry about digital compressors and different stuff like that with my low budget customers. That's where I start to see issues because none of my customers ever fix the economizers when they fail. You know, most of the time they don't want to replace inverter drives or variable frequencies, VFDs, variable frequency drives, when they fail and different things like that too. So digital compressor is going to have a bit of technology that you're going to have a more educated service technician that really knows what he's doing and can see issues, right? So I think it's a great concept. I just worry about the ability to work on them and the ability to have the proper voltage going to them, so that way we don't have issues with the technology that's in them. So I'll tell you guys a story. So today I had a service call. I didn't get to make a video of it, and I wish I could have. So I had a service call today on an ice machine. One of my normal customers, he called and said my ice machine's not working. So I go over there. It's a new Manitowoc Indigo Next Quiet Cube ice machine. So Quiet Cube means that the evaporator is a dual evaporator, the receiver's downstairs, but the compressor and the condenser is on the roof, okay? So with the new Indigo Next machines, the Manitowoc kind of changed it up, and they no longer have communication wires that run between the roof and downstairs. So they basically have just a remote condensing unit on the roof that's controlled by pressure controls, okay? So it turns on and off when the solenoid valve opens downstairs, which is just like a normal pump down system, okay? So I went up to the machine, and what I ended up finding was whenever I would turn it on, it would immediately turn off on high pressure, okay? Well, the weird thing, and this is what confused me, was because that machine no longer has a comm line between the roof and the downstairs like the old machines used to, there's no way for the ice machine to know that it was going off on high pressure. So how is the circuit board down at the evaporator saying this thing is going off on high pressure when there's no communication line? There is a high pressure control on the roof, but it doesn't know when it opens or closes, okay? So I started thinking about it, and long story short, what I ended up finding was that the circuit board had failed inside the ice machine, and it lost its memory, okay? That single circuit board is used for, let's just say, 50 different ice machines, okay? They use a single circuit board, and you program the circuit board with the model number, and then once it has the model number, it knows it has these components or it doesn't. So when I walked up to the unit, it kept going off on high pressure, and what I found was it had the wrong model number in the circuit board. It defaulted to a self-contained ice machine that had a high pressure control. Again, it was I don't know if it was a power related issue or not. Now, I talked to the manufacturer, they had me reprogram it, and of course it was under warranty. They didn't want to change the board. So we reprogrammed that. We're going to see if it's going to happen again. But these are the kind of power issues, or sometimes that it's a power issue that might make me think that that's what's causing the problem, okay? So that's the kind of stuff that I worry about, because what else would cause a circuit board to lose its memory and default like nobody got in there and changed the model number of the ice machine. It's a process. So it obviously defaulted to the first ice machine in its parameters. And so that's the kind of stuff that I worry about. And when I called technical support, I had already fixed it by the time I got on the phone with them. And they basically asked me, is the voltage correct? Are the grounds connected? You know, that kind of stuff. So, you know, power issues cause a lot of weird stuff in our industry. So that's stuff we need to be worried about. All right, I answered that question. Let me look at the list of things to talk about. Let me see. What do reefer techs in my area make an hour? In the northeastern Wisconsin, it's about $40 an hour. Cost of living is a large factor. Well, Troy, again, it depends on where you're working. In the restaurant industry, if you're making over $40 an hour in restaurant refrigeration, you're going to be on the supervisor level, or you're going to be a senior service tech, okay? If you're doing supermarket stuff, I could imagine you're making well into the $50, $60 an hour mark, depending on your skill level and stuff, okay? Union techs, again, I don't know the exact wages, but it really depends on the areas that you live in and the type of work that you do. If you're just a normal service technician, you can expect at a minimum to make about, you know, $35 an hour, but you're going to be a well-rounded service technician to be making that. You know, if you don't have skin, that's going to be someone that understands basic refrigeration, air conditioning, ice machines, exhaust fans, that kind of stuff. If you're missing any of those components, ice machines, exhaust fans, air conditioning, then obviously the pay is going to drop, or different things like that. So it really depends on the area and the type of work you're doing. All right, let's see what else we got in here. What do we have? Okay, already answered that question. All right. If you guys have any more questions, please throw them in the chat. I'll definitely try to get to them in here. You guys do me a favor and smash the like button on the stream. It looks like we have 257 people watching right now and 145 likes. So please smash the like button and let me help the stream. It will definitely help us out, okay? What is a herpes festival? King Solo. Well, that's what you need to ask Bill, because Bill was at the herpes festival over the weekend, and that's why he couldn't know. It was actually Herpes Anonymous meeting that Bill was at, and that's why he couldn't be on the show on Friday night. So you guys probably need to send an email to Bill and ask him. It's curioushvacguy@gmail.com. Ask him why he wasn't on the show and ask him how the Herpes Anonymous meeting went, okay? Let's see what else we got going on in here. Let me see. All right, I'm not seeing anything else in there. Could a Copeland digital compressor wired backwards damage the compressor like the scrolls? John Deere fan, I don't know, but I'm sure that something could happen. I don't work on enough of them to know if they're wired backwards, if that's an issue. So, all right. Well, guys, I am going to wrap this up because I can smell dinner in the background, and my throat is kind of hurting right now from talking too much. So I really appreciate you guys coming in here. Thank you guys so very much. Remember, I go live on the HVAC Overtime YouTube channel on Friday evenings about 6:05 p.m. with my buddies. So definitely come check that one out, okay? Yeah, really, okay? I'm going to go ahead and cue up the outro music if I can figure out how to do this. You know, one of these days I might have everything all set up to where it's really easy and I'm super organized with this, but that's just not my style today, so...